Hi, my name is Asif Khan, and I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft. In today's session, we will try to look at usage of Python with Visual Studio Code. So let me give some disclaimers. I'm not a Python expert. I've been trying to save myself from Python for a very long time because that's not the language I've lived for most part of my career. I've been living and breathing mostly C Sharp and JavaScript and TypeScript, and that's all are the languages which I have worked with. But with the recent traction, if you would have seen any of the clouds, whether it's AWS, Google, or Microsoft Azure, they are all now diverting towards Python and Python being core to all these platforms, and there are every type of support as well. And if you start to use Python, you will feel that, yeah, it is definitely a very good language. But yeah, it took me a while to break that barrier and break the ice with Python. So yeah, it's an interesting experience. But yeah, now the one of the core challenges for anyone coming from Microsoft stack background with C Sharp or Microsoft languages like VB and stuff, we are very aligned or very basically uh, influenced with the debugger model. So if you've ever used C Sharp or Visual Studio, VB.NET with Visual Studio, you know it's like very in-depth debugging capabilities are there, and which makes the development experience very easy and very smooth. Now, considering all these scripting languages, which are on the flip side, are more like built on the CLI or built on the command prompts, so which makes a little bit hard for anyone coming from the Microsoft stack to digest or basically inherit. So I was having the same challenges with Python, but then I started to explore what are the options which I can leverage and get the same debugging experience. And that's where where I found that yeah, there is a native experience of for Python within Visual Studio Code. With Visual Studio also there are some extensions, but I think it's with the Python implementation. What I'm seeing is it's mostly aligned with the experience on the Visual Studio Code side. So we will look forward some things which are available in the Microsoft documentation. So let me navigate you to the official documentation. So this is the Visual Studio Code official documentation for Python, and it talks about step-by-step guide. I think it's pretty detailed as well. So the core fundamental requirement for using Python with Visual Studio Code is you need to basically install this Python extension. And once you install the extension, if you don't have Python pre-installed, then you there is a install Python on like guidelines as well, where you need to download and do stuff. At the end of the day, when you have done all the installation and download of extensions, what you need to do is you need to basically align an interpreter with your specific script file, which the Python interpreter in Visual Studio Code will use, and it will basically debug your script file. So yeah, that's where the Python interpreter is obviously inside the Visual Studio Code. Once you have installed the extension and you select the interpreter, relevant interpreter, and then after that, as the document says, just create a hello file, and then it's all magical. So you'll see there are some breakpoints option as well. You can go and set up some breakpoints. So yeah, as you can see over here, you can set the breakpoint, and yeah, it looks pretty straightforward and simple. So I had the similar thought that yeah, it will be as straightforward and simple as it is shown in the documentation. And if you are on a fresh machine, this will definitely work for you. But in my world, that was not the case. My challenges, like I had some different set of challenges. It took me almost a day to basically get everything working. And I'll show you some of the reasons why that happened. So what you're seeing now, it's a Windows terminal. So it's the latest, like the terminal which Microsoft published. The good part about this terminal is it's really good with respect to what all you can do with the terminal. So if I quickly show you, yep. So what I can do is if I show you what I have over here is I have PowerShell. I can basically run a command prompt. So if I select a command prompt, I'll get a command prompt window. So C user Asif, and then I can have a PowerShell. So I have PowerShell. The reason why you're seeing this icons in different formats because I've installed um, get my Posh, and then so this is the most magical one. So this is the WSL terminal, so Windows Subsystem for Linux. Now this came up with, I think so, um, don't don't catch me on this, but yeah, if I remember it right, from Windows 10 and later, I think they basically enabled Windows Terminal, which is Windows Subsystem for Linux. And what it gives you, it basically gives you a total Linux environment within the Windows operating system, which you have already installed, and it's a seamless experience. So any Linux command or bash command you want to write, you can write and execute, and yeah, it just runs seamless. So if you can see over here, it brings in all the details. So it brings in my document, local settings, and everything aligned to it. So yeah, it's a direct Linux subsystem within your Windows operating system. So the reason I'm showing you all that is this is because this are a couple of things which I've installed on my machine before I started my journey with the Python debugger and extension configuration on the Visual Studio Code. I also have Azure Cloud Shell as well, so that's all fine. So what I did was I had all these things pre-installed, and then I came in and I said, okay, I also had Visual Studio Code, so let me just install the extension. So I went into the extensions, and basically if I click on that, it'll open the extensions, and I'll zoom a little bit so that you can clearly see this. Yep, so if I do that again. Yep, so that's all good. So these are the extension. This is the extension section in Visual Studio Code. So if you write over here as Python, it will bring in all the Python extensions. And so yeah, so that's how the Python extension. The one which I was showing you on the Visual Studio documentation is this one. So once you install this, it will basically bring in the Python transpiler. You can basically use that, sorry, Python interpreter. You can basically use that, and that should be, as per the documentation, that should be straightforward, and you should be able to basically run the code, whatever Python script you want to run. So if I go back to the browser, so as you can see, it just says to install everything, and then you just need to have this Python interpreter. So I'll show you in the Visual Studio Code as well. So if you go inside Visual Studio Code, and if you see over here, so that's basically my Python interpreter where you can select. So the I have two different environment areas. So I have virtual environment, which obviously is a separate discussion, but by default, you'll see this one, which is your Python installation. Yeah, just I think so a couple of things from the background is once you install Python on your machine, you also will have to go and set up some environment variables. So if I go into my environment section, yeah, so if I open it over here, and if I go in environment variables inside the path, if I go inside the path, you can see I have those Python um, uh, path set up as well. Same is the case for Linux as well, so it's nothing fancy. So all good. So I have my Python extensions installed, and that was it. As per the documentation, I came inside the file segment, and what I did was I created a simple sample Python file. So I'll just open that, and it's nothing very hotshot. It's simple person class which I've created. It basically has init method where I am setting the name, and then there is a say hi method where I'm just saying a hello message with the name. And so technically at this point, everything should work. And what I need to do is if I go inside my, yeah, uh, inside the run segment, you can see I have a couple of options. I have start debugging, run without debugging, and a couple of other options as well. If you don't want to do multiple clicks, you can also have this icon over here. So it says you can click on that and run Python file or debug Python file, either of those ways. So if you click on that, it'll just do the debugging option for you. So I'll click on that, and that would basically open terminal once this execution. Okay. Let me re-click. Yeah, so now you can see I have got a couple of other options as well. So there are some pause and skip buttons which have come up. If you are coming from Visual Studio background or Visual Studio Code you would have used earlier with C# or anything, all these are pretty common icons and buttons which are available. Now, as you can see, a new terminal has been opened and I have over here Python Debugger console. Now, this is the console which basically is the place where my basically interpreter will interpret this file, and that's what it is doing. As you can see over here, it is basically saying that this is my Python location, and then this is basically the library details, and that's where my sample.python file it's running. So interesting, this is what happened when the first time I was doing all of this, and that was a shocker because I didn't know what to do now. And it said ZSH command not found CMD, and I was like, what the hell? I've done everything, I've installed everything as per the documentation. What am I missing? So yeah, so it took me some time to understand what exactly was the problem. And what I did, just like anyone else, I came back over here, I opened my command prompt, and I said, let me check if I have Python. So as you can see, it says Python 3.1.0 is installed. So it was something which I was very curious. I thought, let's say maybe it might be a problem with command prompt. It would be command prompt and Python and PowerShell. It might not work. So I did test it on PowerShell as well. So it shows that my environment variable and the Python executable is basically is connected, and it's basically listening to all the requests and stuff going into the particular into the to the command prompt. So that led to like, okay, what else can be the reason for this problem? So what I found was when this debugger was starting, it was starting with this particular debugger environment. So as you can see, it's mount c d g py, and that's my folder where my Python file is. And if I come into my terminal, I can see that, yeah, it's basically the same path which is there on Visual Studio Code. So that basically led to the understanding that, yeah, the terminal is basically taking me, basically debugging the entire code in my WSL environment, Windows Subsystem for Linux. Now, the thing to understand is everything which I've installed on this machine is not inside that WSL environment. It's on this native machine. So that's why if I'm running things on command prompt or PowerShell, I'm able to I'm able to interact with the Python installer and environment. But if I am going into WSL, where I haven't installed Python, I'm not seeing anything. So the core requirement over here was to basically switch my terminal, the default debugger terminal, from my WSL environment to PowerShell or Windows environment. So the way how you do that is you can go into the settings, and I'll quickly show you how you can navigate to that settings. So if you go inside the preference, so go on the files, preferences, and inside the preferences, you can see there is a setting. So if I click on that, it will basically open this. And then you'll get a search bar on the top. You can write terminal. That will basically filter everything for you and take you to the terminal area. So now what I'll do is I'll quickly close this because it's of no use for us now. And if you come inside this, there are a couple of different things. You don't need to bother a lot about everything. So, but you can see there is a edit in settings.json file. So there is an option multiple places. Now you can click on that. That would basically take you to settings.json file. So that's my settings.json file. I'll close this, open it from here. So if I click on this, yep. So now if I click on this, so it's taking me to settings.json file. Now, interestingly over here, there's a lot of things which you don't need to bother about, but what you need to be bothered about is this specific segment, terminal segment. So this terminal segment basically is talking about what are the different terminal options which you have in this particular environment and on this machine. So you can run PowerShell, you can run Git Bash, you can command prompt, and you can also have PowerShell, and also there is a WSL. So that's what you can see over here. So the default profile window for integrated terminal is Ubuntu WSL. So that's basically this particular terminal which I'm showing you over here. So this is my WSL terminal on this machine, and it's Ubuntu, which is running on this machine, as you can see. So this is my Ubuntu machine, which is my WSL terminal. Now, what I need to do is, in order to switch this to, let's say, PowerShell, I need to take the name and I need to just update this particular JSON default integrated terminal section. So if I remove this and if I say PowerShell and if I save this now, so what you will see now is if I go back into my sample .py file and then I run, so that's my debugger because my machine is getting baked because of the recording system as well as the code and everything running in parallel. So so it's a little bit slow. Sorry for that. So now if I click on this, it again, yeah, my debugging mode has started, and soon we will see the terminal coming up over here. And now this time the terminal should be a PowerShell terminal. So as you can see over here, now I have a PowerShell terminal. And inside the PowerShell terminal, it'll again show the path for my Python exe, and then also it will map this particular script file to that Python exe. Okay, interestingly, something failed. So that's good. So we have some live demo errors, and let's fix this quickly. Yeah, actually, that was the previous debugger, previous terminal, which was WSL terminal, which was still holding. So I've just closed all the terminals. There's nothing much. The terminal I had to just go and cross this. That's what was required. So now I have my PowerShell terminal opened, and what you're seeing on the screen is pretty slow. But in real world, when you will be doing on your machine, if your machine is of regular configuration, you should not have such a slow experience. So that's all right. I'll just cancel this for now. It takes some time to load the PowerShell environment in the terminal because, yeah, all the recording and everything which is happening in the background. So now, as you can see, it's basically pointing the virtual environment, which I'll explain a little bit later. You can see I have, this is my Python python.exe, and then on top of it, it is also having that, this is my sample.py file, which you can see over here. So currently, it did run the script, but there are, I think so, some errors. I think so, or maybe not. Okay, maybe it's basically cooking. So let me just click this and debug Python file. So that should be, I think so, quicker than the previous experience. Yes, so the problem was that I had a browser with almost 5 tabs open. Now that was eating all the RAM, and there was no RAM available for this debugger. That's why it was just skipping the entire experience. But as you can see now, I've closed the browser, so I have the debugger enabled. Now it's pretty easy. You can just hover on this, and then you'll get a red icon which you can click, and that can give you the debugger option, or you can click on the row and then press F9. I've just pressed F9 on my keyboard, and if you again press F9, it will remove this. So that's how you enable and disable a debugger. So now if I go inside this, I can just go line by line debugging. So this is, as you can see, this is again, there is a shortcut F10, or if you want to just run without any debugger, you can press F5, that will run everything. But yeah, this is step over F10. You can step into F11, like if there are nested classes, you can go inside that, step out. If you want to come out of the nested class, that's using F11, but normally you will use F10 for most of the purposes. So now what's doing, it's just running through the classes, and this is where I am doing an instantiation of my person class. So what I'm doing is I'm saying person, I'm creating an object of it, and that's my object key, and I'm just passing the name. Now, if you see over here, there is a self, which is basically referencing this class. So you don't need to pass that. It is internally passed while the method instantiation happens. But what you need to do is you need to pass a name. So I'm passing Asif, and that should basically go inside this. If I put a breakpoint over here, so So it's gone inside that init method. It's now setting the name, and this is what I was talking about, the debugger experience. So if you look at this over here, if I come and see variables, I can see there is a name which is set up for me, and and that's a really good one. If you want to add watchers, you can do that as well. So if you can click over here, and then it would basically you can add watches by clicking on the object as well. So there are a couple of options in this, but let's go forward. And so once the object is set up, now what I will do is I'm calling this say underscore hi method, which is this one. And if I click on that, and if I go inside the next stage, so now you can see I have this print message, which should appear once I click on that. It gives me the call stack, it gives me the breakpoint, what are the breakpoints which I have set up on which line numbers and stuff like that. So all that is pretty clean and neat. And if I click on that, that should basically run the command. And now, as you can see, I have a print message which is coming out. So with the debugging experience, as you can see, it's pretty smooth, and it gives a very good experience with respect to your build, and you don't need to go switch between the terminal and your script file with Visual Studio Code and the debugger. It is uh, very good experience with, and I think so it's definitely what a rapid development looks like. So you see and you build at the same time. So as I was talking about the watcher, it's a very good expression expression watcher, which can help you in basically looking at the state of your variables and stuff like that. So let's say if I want to check what's the basically value assigned to my specific variable without looking at the specific variable, or it can be an object or it can be something else. So if want to keep an watch based on if I'm writing a for loop or doing an iteration every time the particular variable or object is set, what value is coming in. If I have to just want to watch it, you can use the watcher. And as you can see, I have just put in the name as which is my variable name. And as soon as it goes to basically initiating the object, it will set up the name. And now you can see I have the variable name assigned, and then that's the watcher. So it's really good for just keeping an eye of the current state of the variable with the iteration which you are onto. So that's pretty much the debugging experience with Python and Visual Studio Code. I would say I highly recommend to use Visual Studio Code for any Python development because it's pretty seamless, and it's a really good experience. So yeah, if you have any questions or comments, do let me know. And obviously, this is a short video, just high level view of the Visual Studio Code and the Python experience aligned to it. I think one of the other thing before we leave, I would like to share with you is around the environment. So if you look into the Microsoft documentation for Visual Studio Code, it also talks about creating a virtual environment. It's very easy to set up a virtual environment. The benefit about virtual environment is because Python is like living with a lot of different versions, and there are a lot of external libraries, things like Conda, things like NumPy. So there are a lot of other like libraries which basically support Python. So if you're, let's say, using um, let's say a machine learning or image recognition or computer vision sort of script which you're trying to build, it will need a lot of external libraries. Now, one of the way how you can install the library is by installing it globally, which would be universal through all the code, but most of the time if you're running multiple projects or have different version of your projects, or maybe running different projects with different library versions, then it becomes a nightmare. So in order to encapsulate that entire experience, you can have your environment, nothing installed globally, but everything installed locally within your code base environment itself. And that's, as you can see over here, I'm having a simple, I'm using a OpenCV. OpenCV is a open computer vision library which is very popular for any sort of image recognition or sort of image transformation, and it is widely used throughout the industry. So I'm just using that in order to install the library. I basically used a virtual environment, and as you can see over here, I have my CV. So I can have one version of CV over here, and let's say if I'm building another project, I need a different version of CV. I can install that on the virtual environment within the project itself instead of installing globally, which might create a conflict. So virtual environment is definitely you should have in your code base when you are basically creating these scripts for applications, and if the application are dependent on different library versions. So this is really important to have a virtual environment. Once you create a virtual environment, the only thing which you'll see is there will be an additional segment before your command line, which will show you that which virtual environment it is targeting to. And there are ways how you can switch this as well. So uh, if I remember it right, if I say deactivate, it should basically exit me out of the virtual environment, hopefully. Okay, no, it didn't. So maybe I'm missing something. But anyways, you can anytime switch between the virtual environments by providing the path, and that's it. Maybe I wrote the command right. Deactivate, deactivate. Yeah, so that's it. So it basically deactivated me the virtual environment, and now I'm working on the global. So if I run the script, everything, all the libraries which will be referred over here will be the global libraries. So yeah, I would recommend to use virtual environment. That will be really helpful for keeping multiple version of external libraries like Conda, Anaconda, uh, NumPy, and stuff like that. So hopefully this session was helpful to you. Please put your comments, messages, and if you are looking for something specific uh, around this piece, I'll be more than happy to assist. So thanks a lot for watching. Have a good day.